John Yoo, welcome to the American Mind.
Thank you.
You are one of the most excoriated members of one of the most excoriated administrations in recent American history. I mean, of course, George W. Bush's administration. Writing about your treatment subsequent to your service, Mike Ullman, in a review of one of your books, Crisis and Command, in the Claremont Review, said the following: "You has been subjected to civil litigation, investigated by Justice Department attorneys for unprofessional conduct and exonerated, threatened with disbarment, picketed outside his classroom, and suffered attempts to have him dismissed as a professor of law at UC Berkeley." Did that reaction surprise you? Did the vehemence of the left's reaction, generally speaking, shock you in any way?
I don't think so in terms of what I thought would happen eventually. I didn't know it would be so immediate. I realized when we were making these decisions back on the few days after September 11th and the months to come, that those decisions would be just as controversial someday, probably as the decisions to drop the nuclear bomb on Japan or to go into Vietnam. And those kinds of decisions spark a lot of criticism and dissension. And I do happen to live in the belly of the beast. I mean, I do live in Berkeley, California, so it would probably, as I always say, I think I've said to you before, it'd be kind of like being West Berlin during the Cold War. I was just this little island of, capitalism and democracy surrounded by this sea of Marxists. So I was just asking for it, I suppose, by living there. But the weather's too good to pass up. So.
Yes, right. But was the reaction on campus at Berkeley worse than it was elsewhere? I mean, were you particularly surprised or disappointed by your colleagues' reaction?
No, actually, I think most of the negative response really was from the people who live in the city of Berkeley itself. I didn't think the response by my colleagues or the students, the people who make up the university campus, would be any more leftist, if you want to call it, than any other campus. But that's just because Berkeley's just like every other major research university. They're all very liberal, and Berkeley's really not more liberal than any other top schools.
Yes. Now, in your latest review in the Claremont Review of Books, you mentioned, though, the reaction of your fellow historians to the Bush administration's policies and to some extent to your writings as well. Let me quote a few choice passages. Arthur Schlesinger Jr., the late Arthur Schlesinger Jr., said that the Bush presidency was, quote, "the most dramatic, sustained, and radical challenge to the rule of law in American history," unquote. And Gary Wills, in a piece in the New York Times called "The Day the Enlightenment Went Out," in 2004, said that thanks to the Bush administration's policies, we now resemble those nations who are our adversaries more than we do our putative friends in Europe who are condemning our fundamentalism. And of course, Sean Wilentz in Rolling Stone, one of his favorite venues, apparently classified Bush with the calamitous presidents, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, Herbert Hoover, and now George W. Has that reaction cooled over time at all? And does it in fact express an endemic misunderstanding somehow in the professoriate?
Well, when you read those comments or you hear them again, you really have to ask, what were these guys smoking when they wrote this? Right? It was actually not a question we ask at Berkeley a lot because we know what they're smoking.
Yes, yes. Or what were they thinking?
Yes, what were they thinking?
Same thing.
Because it seems so, I think personally, so out of line with what was really going on to claim that constitutional government in the United States was ending. It suggests two things. One is, I think even historians don't have an appreciation of what other periods in American history were like as a matter of political culture, but also that they were so wrapped up in the partisanship of the day that they lost their objective judgment. One way I think one sees it as the Obama administration in many ways has continued a lot of the very same policies that are being criticized by the likes of the Arthur Schlesinger Jr.'s of the world. You don't really hear peep from them now these last 4 years. Certainly nothing like the rhetoric that they were using in 2001 to 2008 to describe the current administration. To me, that just means it is much more about partisanship than objectivity.